Hello, welcome to the Kitchen Table Modelers Workshop. My name's Ian. There's my modelling bench where all the action happens. And as you can see there, we've got a painted B25. And this is part 3 of my on-test video series on the new Kaleido Colorworks water-based acrylic paint system being launched from Gaahleri in August 2025. So this is going to be a little longer video because we're looking through the whole painting of this aircraft and I can't do that in half an hour. So if you're going to stick around, please do that, because at the end of the video then I've filmed a section of my thoughts on how this system's performed initially. And that's quite important. It is just an initial test. It's only one model. I do not claim to know everything, and all I can tell you is how it's performed for the model that we've got here on the bench. Just a note as well, there's quite a lot of folk who watch the channel aren't subscribed. If you would think about subscribing to support the channel, I'd be very grateful. We're very, very close to hitting the 3,000 subscriber mark, and I would be delighted if I could break that barrier and keep growing the channel. So if you could consider subscribing, I'd say thank you very much. If you do subscribe, just remember, hit the bell notification button so you don't miss any of my future content. As well as that, Gaahleri are running a series of deals for the month of August 2025, just to celebrate their 4th anniversary, as well as the launch of the paint systems and a few other products, compressors, accessory sets, etc. If you want to use my affiliate link to help support the channel, please consider doing that. Links in the description below. And if you use the code KTM at checkout in their web store, you'll get an extra 10% discount on top of all the orders. That being said, let's get onto the bench and actually start looking at how this paint system performs on this model. And then once we've done that, stick around to the end of the video if you can, and you'll see my thoughts on how well it's performed. So, enough said from me. Let's get the camera on the table and see how things go. Welcome back to the Kitchen Table Modelers Workshop. Part 3 of testing Gaahlerie's new Kaleido Colorworks water-based acrylic paint system. So in part 1 we looked at putting down their matte black primer, which as you can see has gone down beautifully, and I really like the color saturation of this primer. It is absolutely jet black, really nice. In part 2 we looked at getting some paints down, some silver colors down, metal colors, and some different tones over whites and blacks. We also looked at putting the white primer on the roof. And we looked at how resilient this primer is to Tamiya X20A acrylic thinners. And it does take it off, so alcohol-based, isopropanol alcohol-based thinners will attack this. Now we need to look at actually getting some paint down. Now I know Gaahleri haven't got military colours out yet, and I say yet, they are planning to bring out military colours, but what we've got in the sets, and this has actually come out the primary colour set, is we've got grey and we've got blue grey, and this is a natural grey or neutral grey under intermediate blue. So there's the two colours, and the Tamiya equivalent, which is what I usually use, is XF18 medium blue and XF53 neutral grey. Now if you look at the two colours, what you can immediately see is they are close, they're in ballpark, but what they're both needing is darkening down with some dark grey, so battleship grey or something like that, or dark sea grey, just to take the brightness out of them and to bring them into the same colour range as these two here. So betwixt the two of them, we're not far off. Now, Gaahleri do say that these paints are easily mixable, which we're going to test that, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to prime, or say I'm going to put down the base marble coat with these, and then we're going to dark them down with some dark grey, because there is dark grey in the prime color set, and I think there's also one in the mecha set too. So we're going to get the first layer down. Some midges in this room today, and then we're going to change the hue of the colors. We'll dark them down with some dark grey, and with a ghost on the blend coat on the top. Right, now I should have done this before we started. Obviously I didn't, and I should remember to speak into the microphone and not away from it. In my box of tricks that I was sent from Gaahleri, well, actually asked for, was the proprietary brand of retarder thinner. So there's that, and there's the standard thinner. We're going to use the retarder thinner. I thought it was flowing through, but that's obviously the retarder thinner. We're going to use the retarder thinner in the airbrush to aid flow, because I did notice when I was first testing it on the car body, then when I was doing the marble coat, I was getting a little bit of tip dry. Wasn't a lot, but it was some more than none. Now, I have had a few questions in both part 1 and part 2 that are saying, how can you compare this to lacquer paints, and don't believe everything the manufacturer says, and comments as such, and they're all quite valid, I have to say. The guys that use lacquer paints for ease of use, because that's what they like. They've got the equipment for it, and they're used to using it. I tend to use Tamiya paints, and I use Vallejo paints, which are Vallejo's a water-based type acrylic. So in discussions with guys that are commenting, it comes to being a fair point that you really can't compare Gaahlerie's new paint system to lacquer paints. It's not a direct comparison, because they're two completely different paint systems. Now what we can do is compare this against Vallejo Model Air, because they're both similar paint systems, and in all honesty I think this is probably already hands down better than Vallejo Model Air. That's just an initial opinion. I need to paint more with it to see just how this stuff performs, and that's something that I'm going to try and resist doing, is give you a full-blown in-depth, yeah, this is this and this is this, and only spraying 2 or 3 little patches on a car body. I need to paint models. I need to paint a few models before I'm happy to say this paint is a good paint system. Initial use suggests it's all right, yeah, but I need to paint more to have that confidence to say to everyone that's watching my videos, go and buy it. That's the other thing that will come into consideration to folks as well, is it's an acrylic water-based paint system. It's not lacquer. It never will perform the same as lacquer paints. Whereas lacquer paints, you can thin them to the nearest nth of the existence, spray them down, they'll be dry in 5 or 10 minutes, and then you can overcoat, handle, and etc, etc. This stuff you should be able to thin, but the drying time is going to be significantly longer, and it means you're just going to have to plan your model builds and your model painting sessions. That tonight I'll do the bottom of this aircraft, I'll leave it 12 hours, 24 hours, and I'll come back and I'll be able to handle it and then do the top of it. Whereas if I was painting with Tamiya, chances are, if in the morning I could paint the bottom, and in the evening I could paint the top, because it dries and cures that much quicker. So that's the one limitation I would say with this paint system, is it just needs longer drying times. That being said, it shouldn't put you off it. It really has no odor whatsoever. It cleans out the airbrushes, no bother at all. It has no harmful VOCs, volatile organic compounds, the stinky stuff in lacquer-based paints. So it's got a lot going for it, but to compare it with lacquers is kind of unfair on it, because it's not lacquer paint, it's acrylic water-based paint, so it's a totally different painting system. So there we go, that's my 5 penneth worth on the system. Let's actually see how it works in practice when we paint quite a large area. So the whole underside of this aircraft needs to be neutral grey, which for me means if I adopt my usual painting technique, I need to go over all the panels and put in a marble coat. So, as I said before, these bottles have got agitators in, absolutely fantastic. And as I also said before, these bottles have got bloody awful lids on them, and I've fed that back to Gaahleri already and said that the lids on these large bottles, even the smaller size, the 60 ml cleaner, it's got the same lid on it. They're really not so good, and that's no fault in Gaahleris. It's just obviously the lids they're able to get hold of, but it just doesn't aid for pouring very well. And on the primers, then it obviously will dribble and collect, and you'll end up with gub around the lids. So I don't really like the lids on these bottles. The lids on the actual paint dropper bottles themselves, absolutely fantastic. Now, if I was being sensible, I would probably read the instructions to see what the mixing ratio is for paint to thinner. But that would be too much like common sense for me, so I'm just going to go and wing it. So what I've done is I've probably put in about 2 to 3 mil of retarder thinner in there, and then we'll probably do double the amount of paint, so it's a 2 to 1 mix. So 6 mil of paint and roughly 3 mil of retarder thinner. So do a little bit of backflow. Everyone says you shouldn't do it, but I don't think it does any harm. It's a very handy way of mixing the paints. Toothpick in there just to break down the bubbles. We'll give another. There we go. Right. So same pressure as it was before, so around about 20 psi. Let's have a look and see how we go. I'm just going to spray the back of my glove to start with, just to clear the plug of retarder thinner on it. Right, let's see what we can do. What I'll do is I'll zoom it in a bit more. Bring you down a bit. There we go. You will have to excuse me, my bench is exceedingly cluttered. Obviously I've got the BF109 build going on at the same time as this. Not usually this cluttered, but it's just a means to an end to get this done. Now immediately I'm thinking I've probably put too much thinners to paint in there, so I'm going to put some more paint in just to thicken up the mix a little bit. So that's one thing I've noticed then, when you're doing the backflow and you get these bubbles in here. If that was an alcohol based, like a Tamiya based paint product, chances are they would just pop. So I'll just give that a stir with a paintbrush. Right, we now have hopefully a slightly more paint rich mix. Yeah, it was just too thin. Yeah, it's better. I'm going to take off the crown cap. I usually do that when I there we go. It certainly does the marble coat okay, doesn't it? And there's not much sign of tip dry either. So we'll just focus on some of the panels. There is a little bit of tip dry, but it's very, very easy to rub off. A lot of access panels on this wing. So you are able to put in paint quite accurately. So let's finish off the access panels. Well, we can get the marble coat in, but it's not as an easy as flow as it would be if it was Tamiya. I'll say that as a fact. I kind of feel like the paint is almost separating in the color cup. But it's working. I think with practice, there's no reason why you can get the same or similar results as we can with other paint systems. Now you might notice there's been a few little spats of paint, and that's because I'm not pushing the needle closed when I finish, and I'm blowing paint on the next time I pull the trigger. But there we go, that's the marble coat, and then we're going for a blend coat. It's certainly retaining the shading nicely. So we can certainly do our pre-shading and blending the same as we do with, dare I say it, more standardized systems such as Tamiya or lacquer-based paint systems. So we are still able to do the painting techniques that we like. It's just going to take a bit of practice. But the paint's going down beautifully smooth, especially with this Rotada thinner in. So the chances of us actually needing to use a gloss coat for deckling is pretty remote. But there we go. That's probably covered to where I'd want it to be, in all honesty. And with the grey going over the black, it's actually come out a little darker than what the pot would suggest, so we probably won't actually need to do too much colour modulation with this. So the big question is now, do you want to watch me paint a whole aircraft? You know how I do it. I could put it on time lapse, but the chances are it might get a bit boring. So what I'm going to do is I will get the mottle coat on this whole aircraft first, and then we'll come back and we'll put the blend coat down, and we'll actually see what our first impressions are. I personally think initially, and this is initially, it's okay. It's laying down nicely, but I need to learn the mixing ratios and the finessing with this paint system to get the best out of it. And that's the same with any new paint system, and that's the thing to be considerate if you do think to invest in this, is you need to learn it. You need to learn how it works for you. Not everybody, because we all paint differently, but you need to learn how it works for you and how you get the best out of it. But my initial thoughts are reasonably positive, but let's see, once we've painted the whole underside of this, how it looks. So be back in a while. Right, welcome back guys, and as you can see, I've got some sort of pre-shading done on this model. Now I'm not sure if I've crippled myself by putting too much Rotada thinner in, because it has made the paint really, really thin and quite translucent. So in order to get some sort of level opacity, I'm having to do quite a number of passes. My second observation is this paint really does behave similarly to Vallejo Model Air. So if you're using Vallejo Model Air, you'll be able to use this no bother at all. When I do the top, I will not bother thinning it. I'm going to use it straight out of the bottle. But you can see here I've had to do multiple passes to build up some level of opacity. Now, if you're using Tamiya or any lacquer paint, you would be able to build the opacity up a lot quicker. However, that's not a bad thing, because it means you've got some sort of control. But it just means you're going to have to take your time. So now that we've got this on, let's lay down a bit of a top coat and see how we can build that overall layer up to a level that we're happy with. paint certainly goes down wet. Again, I'm not sure if that's just because I've put so much retarder thinner in it. But on the flip side, it does actually give you that ability to help retain the pre-shading you're putting in. So there's a plus point. Because it's opaque, or not opaque, because it's translucent, the thinner paint, then you can retain that. You can retain the mottling and the pre-shading you've done on the model. Now obviously I'm just give myself plenty of margin for error when I come back in with the intermediate blue, and that really will be the test for this paint. Will be to see how we manage to do the fine demarcation work. The paint is laying down absolutely stunningly, beautifully smooth. So the blend coat is very, very easy to do, and it's certainly laying down absolutely lovely. And I honestly think that once we put a pin wash on this, it's really going to make the details pop. Now the big test of this will be when I have to mask it before we put on the top coat, to see how strong and resistant this paint finish is to things like masking. It's going down nicely. Nearly there now. Well, there we go. There is the base color down. Hold on 2 seconds. So, right, there we go. So initial thoughts. It lays down absolutely beautifully smooth. Yes, I put retarder thinner in it. And yes, that'll help it lay down. But it's certainly retaining the pre-shading that was put in. And as I said before, to me, this paint system is working very, very similar to my Vallejo Model Air. Very, very similar indeed. Even when we're painting this top coat on, this blend coat, we've still got the option to come in and do some more blending or highlighting. So this option to build the layers up exists, so you can play around with the levels and the opacity and the highlights and lowlights. It does look like I've got a bit of phlegm in the paint here, so it'll be interesting to see how I get that out. I'm really loath to touch it any, purely because I know how soft the paint's going to be for a moment yet. But for a water-based acrylic, I like it. I do. But you can't compare this to a lacquer color because they're totally different. Totally different systems. As for overall neutral grey color, we're not that far off really. I don't think I'm going to need to do any major modulation. I think this will do us okay for this build. I think the main thing I'm going to be doing is just coming in and touching in and, you know, putting extra highlights in here and there and just getting it how I like it. But I think you can see it's still possible to do marble work. It's still possible to do post shading work. It's probably not going to need a varnish of any sort until after the decals are on, because it is drying so glossy, and it is a gloss based paint system, so it'll be interesting to see how the matte one goes. But super smooth, super smooth, and it's not clogging any of the panel line details whatsoever. They're just popping as they did with the primer coat. In fact, that is us out of paint. There we go. So we painted the whole bottom of that aircraft with about 9mm of paint. Right, I still have the side gun pods to do, the wheel bay doors to do, and the bomb bay doors to do. So I'm going to pop a little extra paint in the airbrush and get them painted to this stage, and then we're going to leave it overnight to cure. We'll come back tomorrow, which will not be that long for you guys, and we'll have a look at the top and see how we get down with. It's going to be interesting doing obviously masking here and doing the demarcation line, and seeing how we get on with that. So I'll get on with that. I'll get all the rest of the neutral grade done, and then say we'll come back and we'll see how we get on with the intermediate blue. So see you again shortly. Right guys, welcome back, and this is the next day, and as you can see, we have got a really rather nicely painted weathered aircraft. Well, I say weathered, it's a modulated paint finish on the aircraft. Now, in full disclosure, because I wanted to get a few more highlights in the paint finish, I have used some Armor Grey, which is K120 gloss of the Kaleido acrylic, and that's come out of the Mecha range. But I think when we compare that to that kind of bluey grey, neutral grey colour, it's not a perfect match. I did say it was, you know, going to be a bit of a struggle to get a match, but it's not far off. By the time we weather this up, it'll be a lot closer. But I think it's reasonably good enough. Now, what I also did, just out of pure morbid curiosity, is I did paint one of the rudders with just neat blue-grey. And it went down really nicely over the black. What I also found is I did a mix where I put some phantom grey, which is a very dark sort of blue slate grey, in to knock this colour back a little. I dusted it over it and it's come really quite nice. And it was just really an experiment to see how I was going to tackle the rest of the aircraft. So, with that in mind, I've pretty much got myself satisfied that I can do the primary marble coat with neat paint because it's a brighter colour, and then we'll knock the colour back and we'll just dust over the blend coat with this darkened colour to hopefully get something similar finish to this. I'm not going to use as much flow improver with this one here, the retarder thinner. I'm not going to use as much as that because that was one of the problems I think I had last night. But the paint itself has dried absolutely beautifully gloss. Not 100% gloss, more on the satin version of gloss, but it's a lot more glossy than anything Tamiya could do. It's gone into the details, absolutely beautiful. And the ones that are really telling is this rivet pattern in here. It's not obscured them at all. So I was able to lay it down in lovely thin translucent coats and build up that opacity to the level I was happy with. So what's next? Well, next thing is I'm going to get the compressor charged up. We're going to get the airbrush loaded up with a mid blue. I am going to use my 0.2 millimeter Mobius airbrush for this, purely because I want to get the control. I'm going to try and do freehand demarcation between the neutral grey and the intermediate blue, which will be challenging certainly here. There's like a band of it here that goes underneath the wing. As far as I can see, the instructions aren't very explicit on that, but what the instructions do say is that there's a band that goes follows along the engine nacelle. So you have your grey underside, intermediate blue going up to the tail of it, and then obviously feeding into the wing surface, and that will be on both sides. And then I'm assuming that there is going to be a reciprocal band of intermediate blue joining the front and rear fuselages together. So I'm going to have to do some masking, certainly in here, just to protect the paint. And then I'm thinking, you know, possibly in here too. But I'm going to endeavour to do a freehand demarcation line, and that'll test to see how tight we can get the spray pattern with this acrylic paint, which I think's something worth testing. It's worth seeing how it performs. So I'm going to get everything squared up and ready to go, and then we'll come back and we'll actually start to look getting some paint down on the model. So back in a moment. Right guys, so I've pushed on a little. I actually started just doing a bit of test painting on the underside around the nacelles, and I realised I was really struggling to film and paint at the same time. So I actually have done all the blending undersides off camera. I made a few mistakes, so I've got to come back in with some grey and touch it in, but I was struggling, so I just got on with it. But I've left 2/3 of the top basically. So you can see here what I've managed to achieve for the pre-shading. It's not too bad. And I was just starting to work here on the end, on the tail fins. Let me get a bit of kitchen roll. So what's my thoughts then? Well, it's all right. It's not Tamiya. That's a simple fact. It is not Tamiya. The more I use this, the more I'm comparing it to a really good version of Vallejo Model Air, because that's what it's feeling like to me. But the one thing you need to do, if like me you use alcohol-based paint systems, or even if you're on lacquer-based paint systems and you want to try this, you need to make sure your airbrush is absolutely spotlessly clean. Otherwise you're going to end up with some form of mayonnaise in the bottom of your airbrush, because I have ended up having to strip and clean my Mobius airbrush because it just wasn't wanting to spray properly, and that really all came down to there being some old Tamiya paint in the paint cup, and it just had gugged itself up, so I needed to strip a bit more air through this. Yeah, I needed to strip and clean the needle and nozzle assembly and the air cap as well, because it was just struggling. However, you can get some nice blends with this. And you can see that. Certainly spraying down nicely. You can get that mottled effect. The other one I was doing that sort of vertical. If you go in here and you just pick a line along the top of the panel and then you dance that airbrush up and down, you end up with little vertical streaks. So it kind of looks like, you know, rain and dirt has been streaking down from the corner of that fuselage. So you can see, you know, you can get blends going on. You can get the airbrush to work with you. But I'm not convinced that Gaahlerie's solved the age-old problem of acrylic paint systems that are water-based and the tip dry. Now, I probably do need to read the instructions, to be honest with you, on how much thinner, retarder thinners I need to put in. I'm going to end up breaking that undercarriage strut if I'm not careful. That's not good. Hold on while I get my stand back. Here's me being clever. I had the stand here for a reason. Yeah. The other thing you can do, I have been doing sometimes on other models, is you can come in with your paper trick. Get that in there. Get that hard demarcation line, but make sure you get close to the panel line. otherwise it looks a bit weird. So we're coming on the wings. Get in here and get the leading edges done. The other thing I think for this stuff, I think it actually works better with a 3mm nozzle or 0.3mm nozzle. And slightly higher air pressures to push it through. Just move this over a little. Try and keep it in picture. No, there we go. There we go. Yeah, there's a little bit of tip dry on there still. It actually sprays a little better without the crown cap on. This airbrush has not been performing very well tonight. There we go. It is getting a little gummed up, so for as much as Gaahleri is saying they've sorted the tip dry problem out, I'm not overly convinced. I'll just blend this into where we've got the demarcation line here. And I know I've said this before already on this video, yes, the colour is not accurate. It's an approximation of intermediate blue, and it should look better when we get the second blended colour coat on, because this is a bit bright, this blue, a little bit bright. Once we get it, I'm just actually put a little blend coat on already, just to knock back those. There we go. And we'll go up there. I'm just going to take that off the table to do it though. So I don't want to spray over the MA109. A little bit of blend coat in there. We've just got the tail to finish painting. And I suppose this is the beauty of the B25 model. If we move away from the paint itself, is the fact that B25 can be finished in any different scheme you like. You know, it had the classic neutral grey over olive drab. It had the RAF colours. It had invasion stripes. It had, I'm sure it had a metal finish before as well. So with this model itself, your world is your oyster with regards to what colours you're going to paint. Right, the last sort of bit we need to put colour down on is the tail fin. And if we're comparing this to Tamiya lacquers, which is what I've been used to using for years now. Sorry, Tamiya acrylics, not lacquers. I don't paint lacquers. I do have a booth, but it's not up to the air exchange needed for dealing with lacquer fumes. And my good lady wife wouldn't thank me for stinking the house out with lacquer fumes. So I don't use lacquers. Although I do have Mr. Surfacer for filling and such like, I don't actually spray lacquers. Right, there's the first base coat. But what I do have is Tamiya acrylics, and I really like Tamiya acrylics. It's the closest thing you're going to get to a lacquer, the alcohol-based paint. And it's a shame in the UK. I did get some retarder for Tamiya acrylics, and it worked beautifully. Must be out of paint, are we? Yeah. Thankfully we're out of paint. Yeah, so Tamiya X20A with Tamiya's own brand acrylics retarder made the paints just absolutely blow up. I mean, they were just amazing. Probably some of the best paints I've ever used. Unfortunately, in the UK, we can't get the retarder. We have to buy it in from abroad, and it's a little bit pricey, so I don't have any. But Tamiya, XF Tamiyas with X28, they work brilliant for me. And it's the closest you're going to get to a lacquer-based paint without using a lacquer-based paint. Right, so we've gotten this far. Now what we need to do is blend the colour coat. So if we get the XF18 and put it against that, you should be able to see that it's a blue, but it's got a lot more grey in it. So as I said before, what I use, we've got the blue-grey here, which is dark on the black. Let's be face it, it's a lot darker than the colour you see in the bottle. What I found was Phantom Grey, which in itself is probably a closer approximation to the intermediate blue, but actually it's quite a dark grey. So what we're going to do is mix the two together, and I'm going to use my 0.3 Mobius airbrush. I think being acrylics, you needn't to go anything less than 0.3. Anything like the 0.2, it's going to struggle with that water-based carrier for the pigments. I'm going to mix in a little bit of matte varnish because I just want to try and see if that makes any odds. So got a bit of matte varnish in there. I'm going to go for what, 1 mil of the blue grey. And maybe 0.5 mil of the phantom grey and a little dribble of the retarder thinner just to aid thinning. Mix it up with a brush, and then what we can do is get the paint on the brush and hold it against there, and that's actually quite a good match. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. We'll go with that. So now that we've got our paint mix, if you want to do a bit of blowback, we can do that. Now we can do the blend coat. And this is hopefully where this really brings it to life. So just start and gently spray it back and forth. Say the compressor set about 20 psi. Don't kill the pre-shading. Just spray nice even coats. Over the model. And that's transforming that into quite a nice representation of intermediate blue. But not only is it transforming into intermediate blue, you're getting it where it looks matter because we put matte in it, but it also is got that nice sort of blue-grey hue that intermediate blue's got. Now, I'm very conscious that I've only got so much paint. And this is the one drawback of mixing paint, is you've got to be able to replicate your colour mixes should you have to mix it again. And it is a very thin layer we're putting down. We're not putting a lot down. But we've got to cover everything we've painted, otherwise it will look a bit weird. I do apologise, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. There we go. Simply zoom out so you guys can see more of what I'm doing. So I'm very conscious of being out of frame. Right, I'm actually quite happy how that's looking. Now the tricky bit is to get the sides. It might be that we're going to have to come back in and mask off a bit. I'm trying to get the engines. I think I might have to do this off camera because it's a bit tricky and I need to see what I'm doing. But I think that gives you... Hold on. Oh, bloody hell. snap that. There we go. Excuse my language. Right, that should give you an idea of, now we've got the color shift with that modulation, and even looking at that paint, we could probably go a shade or two grayer. So what I might do is come back in with another mix, which is more grey in it, and spray over the top. But let me get the rest of the underside done, and I'll touch in any overspray we've got on the grey, and then we'll come back and see how it looks once we've got everything done. So back in a minute. Okay, well, I think we're here. As here as I'm going to be anyway. You can just about see the highlights and the lowlights. I've blended the coats a couple of times just to get that more accurate paint finish. I don't think we're just too far away now. But what I'm probably going to end up doing is bringing some of this back with the weathering. The underside I'm quite happy with. Still a little glossy. I have found that if you put some matte varnish in, it completely knocks the gloss off it 100%. So in that regard, that's good. If you want a matte paint finish, of course. I should still be able to get decals on this without putting gloss varnish down. Obviously, if I left it just as the paint comes out of the bottle, it would have been as glossy as the underside. But I want to do just an experiment and see if adding matte coat makes any odds. Now, this is needing to cure. It's still a little tacky. It's actually a bit better touch dry than when we were priming, but it's needing to cure up completely, harden off, and then I can think about obviously getting decals on, and then we can think about actually putting a coat of varnish down to weather on this. So that's that. That's the overall effect using Gaahlerie's Kaleido acrylic Colorworks paint system. A complete mix and match to get a close approximation of my usual Tamiya colours. I'm actually quite happy with it. I think we've got that nice demarcation between the grey and the blue, and once we get the decals on and get some pin washes on this, I think it's going to pop. I really do think it is going to look not too bad at all. Likes these guns, I'll be putting them on shortly. I'm obviously going to paint the gun barrels. I'll probably, I need to put it on before we weather it. I might need to do a little bit of blend work to get these to match in. Obviously been painting off the aircraft, and they might be slightly different, but there's not going to be much in it. The next job to do for this will be getting the undercarriage sprayed up with silver. We'll look at that another time. So I'm going to get the camera up on me, and we'll have a bit of a sum up, I think. Speak to you in a moment. So there we go. There is the B25 painted up. We've got a custom mix of US Intermediate Blue on the top surface, and then we've got that neutral grey finish on the lower surfaces. Now, let's get some clarity on the table. First of all, I accept these aren't the correct colours. This is my model. I'm happy to have an approximate of the colours to test how this paint system from Gaahleri works. It's a new water-based acrylic paint system, and I've been given it to test it, so the only way I can test it properly is by painting the model. So yes, I know it's not the correct colours, but it's close enough for government work. I'm happy enough with the results in regards to that. We've still got the decals to put on, we've still got the weathering to do and finish the model overall, so there's plenty of room to modulate the colours and weather the aircraft and make it look more in keeping with the genre. But no, it's not an exact colour match. Right, second preface is this isn't a lacquer based system, and I know It's been advertised as giving you similar results to lacquers, but it's not a lacquer-based paint system. So it's actually kind of unfair to compare it to a lacquer-based system. And there are plenty of them out there. And I know there are a lot of models that really like lacquers, and I know that lacquers have a certain set of attributes that really suit themselves to model making. I don't use lacquers, never have. The only lacquer paints I've got is Mr. Surfacer, and when I spray Mr. Surfacer as a primer, my missus gives me a clap around the lug hole because it stinks the house out. So I don't use lacquers. I am a Tamiya man. Tamiya XF acrylic paint, so it's an alcohol-based acrylic paint system, and I've been using that for years. I do have some Gunsanyo, and I do also have some Vallejo Modeler, and I have done videos filming using Vallejo Modeler. But I'm not an acrylic painter, so I'm not even going to claim to know how acrylic paints perform and compare this paint system to an acrylic paint, lacquer paint system. There's just no point. But you can compare this to other acrylics. Simply, you can, because you're comparing like for like. So the nearest paint system that I use to this Gaahleri system is Vallejo Modeler. I've just mentioned it. So how does it compare to Vallejo Modeler? Well, colors aside, because we know Vallejo have got specific paint sets for extensive military colors. The properties of the paints is what we're looking at. Is how does it spray? How does it lay down on the model? How durable is it? And is it easy to clean? There you go, 4 parameters that we can test. Well, how does it spray? It sprays rather nicely. I have to say that it probably sprays better through a 0.3 needle than a 0.2, but I had bother with my 0.2, and I think that was due to a bit of contamination from old Tamiya paint, and it was gotten a bit gloopy there in the needle and was struggling to get the paint down. But when it did work, after I cleaned it, it worked fine, but it seemed to be happier going through a 0.3. How did it lay down? Beautifully. I mean, really, really beautifully. You can see the underside has got a lovely gloss finish, and the top side, it should be gloss, but it's satin, and it's only satin because I was a bit cheeky and I put a little bit of matte varnish in the paint just to see if I can knock the gloss down, and it worked perfectly. How does it conform to the panel lines? Beautifully. It doesn't fill them. It just settles down on top of that primer, which is an absolutely stunning base coat, and it just seems to enhance the panel lines almost. So yeah, can't fault it. How durable is it? It's reasonably durable, and certainly the stuff we sprayed on the car body a couple of days ago is really durable, and it's probably more durable than Vallejo Modeler. That is a really soft paint system that you'd need to coat with varnish to kind of protect it. This, I think, is probably going to be more robust, and this is where this paint system certainly will excel when compared to other acrylics. How easy is it to clean? Really easy. Just use alcohol. Tamiya X20A just strips out the airbrush, no bother at all. And if you remember when we did the part 2, we stripped the roof of that car body with Tamiya X20A, and it just came away absolutely lovely. So, what's my thoughts? Well, I'll give you my thoughts for this model, because it is just one model I've painted, really. I like it. I like it for what it is, a water-based acrylic paint system. And I like it because I've used, like I say, Vallejo Modeler. So I am used to using an acrylic system over a lacquer system. Is it something that I think lacquer-based painters are going to jump for? Well, it's up to them. It depends if you want that system that doesn't have the smell, odor, and the general sort of hassles of what they call VOCs, volatile organic compounds, evaporating out of your paint system to cure it up, going in the atmosphere, and then you're being contaminated with it. Do you still need to use precautions? Well, of course you do. It's a paint system, it's an aerosol. You need to protect your lungs. But it's not as antisocial as lacquers. That's the point. Are there limitations? Well, currently there are, yeah, because there's no military colours. It's all based around the marketplace that Gaahleri are playing to. Well, what do you mean, I hear you say? Well, look at the colors. You've got colors primary, colors mecha, colors metal. And those color systems lend themselves naturally to vehicle modeling and Gundam modeling, which is huge, absolutely huge in the Far East, as well as Warhammer modeling, which is huge. So they're playing to the biggest section of the marketplace, far bigger than military-based modelers. Yes, we are global as a modeling community, but we're not as big as the ones I just mentioned. So they're naturally playing to that first. That's where the biggest marketplace is. You make a product to go to the biggest marketplace to give yourself the opportunity to make the biggest profit. They are developing military colors. I can't wait to see them because I will use them. If they work as well as this, I will use them. I like them. And that's my initial thoughts. I like it. It's okay. It's not too bad at all. I'm actually more excited now to build non-military subjects now that I've got paints and colors that I think will be able to meet the models that I have, so motorbikes and cars. But this is a qualified opinion for one model only, and it would be unjust of me to just stick at that and say, yeah, everyone go out and buy it. I'm going to use this over the next few months, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to add to this 3 set of videos with a more broader opinion of how these paints have performed over a longer period of time, over a number of different models. And then when you build that base of opinion up, then we can come back and say, yes, go and buy it if that's what you're looking for, or no, it's not as good as they thought it was, don't bother. My initial thoughts are, I like it. It's easy enough to use because I've used acrylic water-based systems before. I know how they perform and I know how to get the best out of them. If you are a lacquer painter, you're going to have to learn how to use acrylic-based systems before you can actually say, yeah, you like it or you don't. And there's the key of it. Do you want to invest into a new paint system on the off chance you might like it or you might not? Well, that's up to you as a customer. Their pricing's reasonably good, reasonably keen. This is August 2025. They've got a 4-year anniversary sale on. Shameless plug, I have an affiliate link in the description below. If you use the code KTM at checkout, you'll get an extra 10% over and above the discounts that are on at the moment. So, if you have any thoughts or questions, comments, put them in the comment section below. I will take time to read them and I will get around to responding, and I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on what Gaahleri have done in launching a new paint system. As always, if you like what you see on the channel, please consider subscribing to support the channel, and if you do like the videos, give it a thumbs up as well. That helps with the algorithm. If you subscribe, remember hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any future content. So all I can say now is, until next time guys, stay safe, happy modeling. We'll see you again soon.